Were you successful? In case you tried this on your own and you succeeded, great job. In case you faced some problems, well, that is no problem at all. We just got started with the composition API, so it is absolutely normal that you're maybe not 100% sure about all the concepts yet. Now we'll migrate this to the composition API together. And I will start in app view. App view is a very simple component. It has a very simple template where I, in the end, just use two other components and pass data to those components. And then we got two pieces of data here. The currently selected user, when we select a user here to view the projects, and the active users, which simply are our users which we want to display. And the active users are populated with some dummy user data, which is coming from the dummy data JavaScript file. In there, I'm simply exporting a long array, and I just outsourced this into a separate file so that I don't have this long array in my app view file. Of course, that could be data which we fetch from a server in reality. Here, it's just this dummy user data. So, in order to migrate this component to the composition API, in the end, we will replace the data and the methods option with the new setup option. Because that's what you learned in this module. The setup option, this setup method, is the key to using the composition API, because in there you set up your component, the data you want to be able to use in your template, and also all the functions that should be callable, and so on. And here we got two pieces of data, our active users and a selected user. So now we can make our first decision on how we want to manage that data. We could manage that data in an object, and then we can create that object either as a ref or with the reactive function, as you learned, or we manage two separate pieces of data, selected user and this user data array. It's up to you what you want to do. I will actually go for the separated data. So I will import from view, and I will import this ref function because I want to create two separate refs here. Again, this is just one approach, and if you want to manage one object with reactive maybe, that is fine as well. But I will go for this ref here, or for these two refs, and then we have the selected user here, where I create a new ref, where the initial value is null, and then we have the active users, also a ref, where I pass in my user data. Now actually, by the way, user data, this doesn't need to be a ref, because in this entire component I got no logic for changing active users. And if you never change data, this probably doesn't need to be a ref, because view doesn't need to know about any changes then, if there are no changes. So actually, active users could also just be managed as regular data, like this, because it's data that never changes. So I will not even turn this into a ref here to make it clear that we don't need a ref here. Well, and then we want to expose this to our template. So we return this object in the setup method, which is a key concept. You always return an object in setup to tell view which features, you could say, which constants and variables and functions from inside the setup method should be available in the template. And here I want to expose the selected user using this JavaScript shorthand, where instead of writing this, I write this, and I expose my active users. Active users can't change, or view will not notice any changes since it isn't a ref, but of course this does not mean that we can't expose it to the template. We absolutely can. And with that, we can get rid of the data method here. And I will remove it here. You could, of course, also comment it out if you want to see it in comparison. Now, with that, we migrated our data. Now, we also want to migrate the method, because right now this method wouldn't work. We tried to work with this selected user, and this property doesn't exist anymore because I just deleted data. As a side note, theoretically, you can use data, methods, and setup side by side if there is some data and functionality you want to manage with the composition API and other data and functionality you want to manage with the options API. So even inside of the same component, you could mix those concepts. In reality, I would say you will typically migrate an entire component to the composition API or stick to the options API and not mix it. But theoretically, you could mix it. Anyways, here I want to migrate everything. So therefore, in setup, we can define a function, maybe keep the name, select user, expect to get the user ID as an argument here, and then set selected user.value equal to, well, basically this logic. So I can copy this, except for the this keyword, and find the user with that ID in my active users and set my selected user equal to that user. And now we can also get rid of methods here and expose select user like this to the template as well, so that our event binding here, still works. And that should be all. If we save this and reload, this application works just as it does before. Because as I also mentioned throughout this module, you can absolutely combine components that use the options API, which in this case are all other components, and components that use the composition API, the app view component in this case. This is absolutely possible, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So with that, we migrated our first component. Let's now move on to the next one.